That music there is not introducing an NBA segment. You'll remember that music. It is the old NBA on NBC intro, and it is iconic. I mean, I hear that, and I can just picture Bob Costas coming on, Marv Albert. I mean, just the legends of NBA broadcasting back in the 90s. I can just hear their voices coming over that theme song. We are playing that coming in here, not because we're introducing an NBA segment, but because we are introducing the composer of that theme song, John Tesh, and it's incredible. It is incredible what this guy has done. He's an NC State grad, so that's why we are having him here on ACC Radio. But he's won Emmys, he's won Grammys, he's been all over your television. And he's a stud guy, and he is now joining us. John, it's good to have you, man. Thanks so much for coming on here.
You know, I just have a tape recorder rolling here because I knew you guys would say something really cool, and I got it. You said he's a stud guy, so I'm just going to put that on a loop. I'm going to play that for my wife, and, so we'll be good to go. I'm very excited about talking to you guys. What are we doing? What's going on?
Well, it's you. I can't imagine there are enough hours in a day with all the things that you have done. I mean, we were doing the research here to prepare for this. I guess we got to start with, are the rumors that you played lacrosse and soccer at NC State true? Were you a two-sport star at NC State?
I was, and I was trying to get on the track team. I walked on. It's funny because I'm right in the middle of writing a book, and I'm on that chapter, the NC State chapter. But it's I walked on. I played soccer and a little bit of lacrosse in high school. I went to a Long Island high school, so they crowned the homecoming queen at the lacrosse game. So everybody, and I was a high jumper. But so there was a guy in my dorm room, Steve Thomas, who was a scholarship guy on the state soccer team, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come try out for the team?" So I said, "I'm not doing that." And he goes, and he said, "Yeah, come on." So I tried out. I got on the team, and then the lacrosse team was just starting. It was a club team, and then it became a varsity team. So, they wouldn't even give me any lunch money. I played for free.
Yeah, welcome to today's argument about what athletes are paid in college, John.
Right. But here's the wild thing. I don't want to hijack the whole idea for the interview, but I did not graduate from NC State. I was thrown out of NC State. I broke the honor code at NC State. They threw me out, and as a rising senior, and my parents threw me out of the house. I lived in a tent in Raleigh in Umstead Park for 6 months and pumped gas and worked for C.C. Mangum Construction, and that's how I got my first radio job. So I'm a disgraced individual, but it was them throwing me out that and then not having a net that caused me to have to pull my pants up and say, here I have to make something out of myself.
That is okay. So, are you from? Now you mentioned Long Island, but are you from rural Hall or where? Are you from North Carolina?
My whole family is from the South, the deep South, right?
Okay.
But my dad worked when my dad got out of World War II, he got a job at Hanes selling underwear, and he was transferred to New York, and then that's when I was born. So I'm the only Yankee in the whole lineage, and they would drive in summertime. They would drive me to North Carolina and dump me off at my grandparents' house, and I had to learn how to slap the hogs and make barbecue and all the rest of that stuff. So when I was at State, I picked up a Southern accent. So I had a Southern accent and a Long Island accent. And people were like, "Where are you from?" Yeah. So anyway, I got I know you didn't ask, but you should know that what happened to me is I was trying to switch majors. My dad wanted me to study textile chemistry, and it's perfect for North Carolina State, right? Engineering school. Of course. So my dad wanted me to study textile chemistry. He said I would starve to death. I had 2 scholarships to go to music schools, and he said, "No, you're not doing that." And so I tried to switch my major without telling him, which I don't advise.
Right.
And so I went to all my professors, right? And the statistics professor was the only one who said, "Well, you're past the drop ad time. I'm not going to sign this." And so my soccer buddy, Steve Thomas, said, "I'll do it. I do it. There's hundreds of key people in these classes. Just sign the professor's name." And so I said, "Well, wait, that's forgery." He goes, "I do it all the time." So I did. I signed his name, and I got caught. And
how'd you get caught?
The professor, this guy, and by the way, he's probably saved my life. But he I guess he looked at all of his drop ad cards and said, "That's not my signature." And he was a by the book guy. And so I appealed. I tried to get back in. I appealed before the honor court and all that stuff, and they said, "No, you're going to have to sit out another semester." In the meantime, I got a job at a radio station, and one thing led to another. And in 3 years, from living in a tent, right? I'm living in a tent, and in 3 years from that moment, I was anchoring the news in New York City. I have no idea how that happened.
Well, it's amazing, John. And John Tesh joining us here on ACC Today. I'm Chris Spatola. It's amazing. You're known for so many things, but it's amazing how sports has sort of had its theme. I mean, you were a sportscaster for CBS, right? And then later NBC. You've done the Tour de France, the U.S. Open, gymnastics, Summer Olympics. I mean, you've done a lot of sports broadcasting in your time.
Well, and here's the weird thing about it, Chris, is that I ended up on radio news and then TV news. I bounced around. I worked with Pat Sajak in Nashville on local news and Oprah Winfrey, and then at about 23 years old, I was working in New York City for about 6 or 7 years, and then these guys at CBS Sports called me up and they said, "Hey, we're doing this new thing. We're going to call it Sports CBS." I can't remember what they changed the name. It used to be Sports Spectacular, right? But they had all these new guys, and they hired me and Pat O'Brien to sort of be reporters. And they'd seen some live stuff that I did, and I said, "I don't know anything about sports." I told him this. He called me up on the phone. He said, "We'd like you to meet with you." I said, "Listen, I can't name 3 NBA teams." And he laughed, ha ha ha. And I said, "No, I'm not kidding. I'm not a sportscaster." He said, "Well, what we have in mind for you is nobody knows anything about the sports anyway." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he goes, ski flying, speed skating, Tour de France bike race, and gymnastics and figure skating and all the rest of that. So, yeah, for 6 years, I had the best job on the planet of sending me all over the world to cover these events. But what happened with the Tour de France, as you mentioned, is I worked with a guy named David Michaels, who is Al Michaels' brother. Okay. And David is a tremendous Olympic producer, and he taught me how to tell stories on the Tour de France, but he also said, "Hey, bring your synthesizers with you and we'll use your music." So, yeah, I mean, for 6-7 years and for 2 months out of every year, I was in a van traveling from, it's a 24-stage race, right? Traveling from city to city in France and, writing an hour and a half of music every week and announcing that race. And that really taught me everything about writing and also about writing music.
Were you sort of holding down these other jobs, John, to as a way to make a living while you pursued music? Or, I mean, how does your music career tie into this entertainment career?
Yeah, it's a good question. Chris, there's a great line from it's actually in the Bible, but there's in one form or another. But James Allen wrote the book As a Man Thinketh, and it basically is you will become what you think about most of the time. So if you think about beer most of the time, right? I could not stop thinking about music. It's what I grew up with, and so. But I realized that I also like performing, And that's really what media was for me. And I ended up with an inside track, the NBA basketball theme, which is still, is still knocking around out there. That was written because I was working for NBC Sports at the time, right? And I knew through the grapevine that they were looking for a theme. And so I'm calling into my answering machine back home while I'm on the road, singing. And then finally I came up with, and I got back
so you're
home.
Leaving that on your voicemail?
I left that on my voicemail. I got home 2 weeks later from being out in the Tour de France, and I only had one message on my machine, my answering machine, and it was that one. Yeah. And I put the answer, and we tell this story live at concert. Right? I put the answering machine on my piano, and I figured out the chords. Fortunately, they were all white keys, and I said, "Wow, this might be something." And then I started watching basketball and taping basketball on my Betamax, and I figured out that Michael Jordan and those guys, that a fast break was about 127 beats a minute, right? So a little faster than a Donna Summer song. And so I set my tempo to that, and then played it with a bunch of synthesizers and got a small orchestra of friends to play it, send it to NBC, and they said, "Well, this will work." that was the vetting process. This will work. And it put two of my kids through college. It's the funniest story ever.
John's NBA on NBC theme, called Round Ball Rock, was used, John, this is crazy, from 1990 to 2002. It was played over 12,000 times during that run. And then ABC got the rights. Did you try to sell it to ABC?
Oh, we told you. Listen, we went to ABC and said, because they wanted to distance themselves from the sound of NBC's coverage, right? Yeah. And so we actually went to them and said, "Hey, listen, I can." And I was still working at Entertainment Tonight, I think. No, I wasn't. But I went to them through an agent, and I said, "Listen, I can get Billy Joel and Elton John and Eric Clapton all to play. They're all. You know, I've interviewed them. I get them all to play on this thing. They would love to do it." They're like, "No, we're good." So I didn't call them again. You know?
Yeah, John Tesh here with us. By the way, John is. He is nominated for the National Radio Hall of Fame. You could vote for him by texting 400 to 96000 or by heading to radiovote.com. I read, John, that you were in Europe when Paramount came and asked you to be the anchor for Entertainment Tonight. What's the story behind you getting hired to do that?
Yeah, it was so bizarre. Yeah, I'm up to my ears in bike racers, you know, and I'm in like Roubaix, France, with David Michaels, and I got this, you know, phone message at the little chateau that we were staying at up in the mountains, and it was, you know, Frank Kelly wants to give him a call from Paramount. I had no idea, so I called him, and he says, "Oh, hey," you know, and explains this whole thing. He says, "I managed the show called Entertainment Tonight. Have you seen it?" And I said, "No, I hadn't. I've been living in Europe for so long." So he describes it to me, and I said, "Well, listen, I've got another, you know, year left on my contract for sports." But and he said, "Well, why don't you come audition with Mary Hart, the other anchor, when you get back to New York?" I was living in New York at the time, and so I showed up for the audition in cut off jean shorts and like, you know, a beard and hair down to my shoulders because I hadn't been on the air for so long. I was just doing, like, you know, voiceover stuff for the Tour de France. And Mary shows up in her Mary Hart regalia, right?
Right.
And so they had this teleprompter in front of me, and it's and I read the celebrity birthdays like I was doing Bill Johnson's downhill run in Wengen, Switzerland. You know, it was like, he's off the course, he's on the course, he's back on the course, you know, celebrating a birthday today, you know. And Mary goes, whoa, back off a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and I didn't hear from them forever. And then they called back and said, "Here's the thing: we know you want to be a full-time musician, blah blah blah. We'd like to hire you, but we'll also give you access to all of our recording facilities at Paramount." And I just couldn't say yes fast enough, and that's how that happened.
What are you most known for, John? What do people recognize you the most for?
You know, it's changed over the years. Nothing right now.
NC State grad.
Or
yeah,
not
exactly.
grad. No, almost grad. Yeah, attended NC State.
Right.
Yeah. You know, we were performing a concert not too long ago, and we were in the middle of the country somewhere, and this like 20-year-old in a diner comes up to me and says, "Hey, can I have your autograph?" And I said, "Why? You don't know who I am." She goes, "You're John Tesh." And I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Why do you want my autograph, though?" And she goes, "Well, you know," I said, "You don't know who I am." And she said, "No, you're retro."
Oh, you've reached that point.
She says, "Yeah." She says, I'm a millennial, and we like retro stuff. And so I'm retro stuff. You know what really happened was because of Live at Red Rocks, this big PBS special that we did when I was still at Entertainment Tonight, and it just sort of blew up. There are more people who will mention music now, than they do Entertainment Tonight. They don't remember that I was on that show.
One of the funniest things, John, is you were in a cover band that apparently you were competing out there with Billy Joel, who was in another cover band. You at one point were a reporter in Tennessee, I read, in the same sort of locale where Oprah was being a reporter. Like, so you were competing in various jobs against Oprah and Billy Joel at one point in your career.
Yeah, that's very good. I've never connected those two stories, but it's for sure. Yeah, Oprah was. I was 21, and Oprah was 19 in Nashville in 1973, 72, 73, and she was on Channel 5 in Nashville. I was on Channel 4, so we were at competing stations, and we would be going for the same stories. And we actually ended up really close friends. We actually ended up going out for a while for about 6 months, just sort of friendly dinners and stuff like that. The problem was that and it's not like this now, but in Nashville back then, a black woman and a white man walking into a restaurant, you could clear the restaurant out. It was we were like, what the hell is this? And so we would just go into restaurants and public places to clear them out so we could be alone.
A different day, Tennessee in those days, 40 years ago. Yeah,
changed a lot now, thank God. But the Billy Joel thing was Billy was in a band called the Hassles back in the 60s, and I was in a band called the Best of Both Worlds, which was we were a Blood, Sweat, and Tears cover band. And so it was. I always tell people that I was in a rival band to Billy Joel. Except the real story is that it wasn't much of a rivalry. If Billy didn't want the gig, then we got it. We were like RC Cola, But yeah, that was a killer band back in those days. His band.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. So you still use that NBA theme music for? You've got a syndicated radio show, and then for Intelligence for Your Life. Does that?
Yeah, we use that. It's a different recording of it. We use that, and we play it. And one of the most fun things that we do musically is we'll play that theme on stage, and I have a collection of videos of and you can see this if you just Google the Round Ball Rock on YouTube. There are kids that have learned how to play this thing on every instrument you can imagine, on kazoos, on Casio keyboards, on ukuleles, and they're playing it much better than I've ever played. And they've learned this thing, and so we have all those videos and we bring them on stage, and then we, of course, we play along with them. But I had no idea that was even going on until my drummer said, "Hey, people are playing your theme on YouTube." So it's a great compliment.
You've become retro, so that's
I'm retro. I'm retro. Yeah.
It's unbelievable, John. Again, you can vote for John. He's been nominated for the National Radio Hall of Fame. You can vote for him at radiovote.com, or you can text 400 to 96000. John, this was a pleasure. It's really, really good to talk to you.
You too, and what's really wild about the Hall of Fame stuff? There's like a music Hall of Fame thing that I'm doing in North Carolina at the end of this year. When you reach a certain age, Chris, it's like all of a sudden it's like, let's get this to him before he dies. He probably only got a couple of years, Bob, and so let's put this together.
Let's do it now. Well, you've certainly earned it. By the way, we had to look up Ranker has you as the third most famous NC State grad behind Zach Galifianakis, and John Edwards is on the list as at number 2. So you're right behind those two guys.
That's some great company. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe if I go back, maybe I can get pardoned or something. I mean, maybe that's our next thing. You can help me, Chris. You can help me get pardoned. It's like, text pardon to 9.
Yeah, seriously, get an honorary degree. You've earned it after all these years.
Come on, man. Hey, thanks. Yeah. This was great fun for me going through the old days. I appreciate the time.
Well, we appreciate your time, John. Thank you so much. That's John Tesh, legendary entertainer, musician, and an NC State student for a period before he was thrown out. It's a good story there.